Message from M370 passenger. Temperature in the cabin, warm. Seems to be a problem with the craft's air conditioning. Difficulty to breathe. Moments before the flight vanished, this was her final message. But investigators believe there's something hidden in those words, a clue that changes everything about Flight 370. Let's dig in. The vanishing. On the night of March 8, 2014, something happened that would forever shatter our understanding of what's possible in modern aviation. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, departed from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at exactly E:0.41 Malaysia time, carrying 239 souls on what should have been a routine 6-hour journey to Beijing. Among those passengers were 227 people from 14 different nations, predominantly Chinese and Malaysian citizens, along with 12 Malaysian crew members, all settling in for what they believed would be an unremarkable overnight flight across the South China Sea. At the controls sat 2 experienced aviators. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, aged 53, had accumulated over 18,000 flying hours throughout his distinguished career with Malaysia Airlines. Beside him, First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, aged 27, was relatively early in his aviation journey, but fully qualified to operate the sophisticated Boeing 777. The flight proceeded normally through its initial phase. Air traffic controllers monitored the aircraft's progress as it climbed to cruising altitude and made its way toward Vietnamese airspace. Then, at precisely 01:19 Malaysia time, came the last voice communication from the cockpit. A calm, routine sign-off stating, "Good night, Malaysian 370" to Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control as the plane approached the handover point to Vietnamese controllers. These would be the final words ever heard from anyone aboard flight MH370. The plane was last detected on civilian radar at 01:21 Malaysia time over the South China Sea, and then it simply vanished. The Boeing 777, one of the most technologically advanced and reliable aircraft ever built, had somehow disappeared from the sky as if it had never existed at all. But here's where the mystery deepens into something far more sinister and deliberate. Shortly after that final voice communication, the aircraft's transponder was disabled, the crucial piece of equipment that broadcasts the plane's identity, altitude, and position to air traffic control radar systems. Almost simultaneously, the ACARS system ceased transmissions. ACARS, or the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, is essentially the plane's automated messaging service, constantly sending data about the aircraft's health, position, and status back to ground stations. For both systems to stop functioning at nearly the same time wasn't a coincidence or a technical malfunction, it was deliberate human action. What Malaysian military radar detected next would transform this from a tragic accident into something far more disturbing. The radar tracked the aircraft turning west, crossing back over the Malay Peninsula and heading northwest over the Strait of Malacca before eventually turning south. This wasn't an aircraft experiencing technical difficulties or following emergency procedures. This was a plane executing precise, deliberate navigational maneuvers under someone's control.
Gentlemen, was the disappearance of MH370 an act of God or an act of man?
The disappearance of this aircraft was an act of man.
Air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur declared an emergency at 02:40 Malaysia time after losing contact with the aircraft. But incredibly, Malaysia Airlines didn't announce the disappearance publicly until 07:24 Malaysia time, nearly 6.5 hours after the plane had vanished from radar screens. By then, the aircraft had been missing for over 6 hours, and any chance of immediate rescue or recovery had long since evaporated. The initial search efforts were, in retrospect, entirely misdirected. Teams focused their attention on the South China Sea, the plane's last known location on civilian radar, deploying ships and aircraft to scour the waters where the Boeing 777 should have crashed if it had experienced sudden catastrophic failure. But as military radar data was analyzed and shared, the search area began shifting westward, and then, based on crucial satellite data from the British company Inmarsat, dramatically southward into the vast, remote expanses of the southern Indian Ocean. The satellite data told a chilling story. Inmarsat's analysis revealed 7 automated handshakes, or pings, between the aircraft and a communications satellite, occurring at regular intervals after the plane had disappeared from radar. These weren't communications from the pilots or passengers, they were automatic system checks, the aircraft's computers reaching out to establish contact with ground stations. The final ping was registered at 08:19 Malaysia time, indicating that MH370 had somehow remained airborne for over 6 hours after its last voice communication, flying along what analysts would would come to call the Seventh Arc, a curved line in the southern Indian Ocean representing the possible positions where the aircraft could have been when that final satellite handshake occurred. On March 24, 2014, 16 agonizing days after the disappearance, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak made the devastating announcement. Based on new satellite data analysis, flight MH370 had ended its journey in the remote southern Indian Ocean, far from any possible landing site. All 239 passengers and crew, he stated with grave finality, were presumed dead. But presumed was all they could say, because the aircraft itself remained missing, swallowed by the ocean's depths, leaving behind only questions, theories, and the unbearable grief of families desperate for answers.
It just seems to really tear at the fabric of reality that a whole jetliner has just disappeared.
New hope after a decade of despair.
The underwater search operations, led by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, faced conditions that pushed the boundaries of maritime technology and human endurance. The search teams deployed autonomous underwater vehicles and towed pinger locators to scan priority areas along the Seventh Arc, working at depths reaching up to 6,000 meters, over 3.5 miles beneath the ocean's surface. The seafloor in these regions wasn't smooth or uniform. It featured treacherous terrain, including the Broken Ridge, with its steep slopes, massive ridges, and unpredictable geological formations that made scanning extraordinarily difficult.
What these vessels, what these new Ocean Infinity vessels represent, frankly, is as big a transition in maritime technology as the movement from sail to steam in the 1800s. Wow. This is a giant leap in maritime technology.
The weather conditions added another layer of impossibility to an already impossible task.
Make no mistakes, the Indian Ocean that they're working in is among the worst in the world. They've recorded wave heights of 20 meters, so 60 feet. It's extreme conditions.
After scanning 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor without finding any trace of the aircraft, the official underwater search was suspended in January 2017. The families of the victims, already devastated by the loss of their loved ones, now faced the additional torture of having no closure, no wreckage to visit, no physical confirmation of what had happened to their husbands, wives, children, parents, and friends. Private firm Ocean Infinity attempted a second search in 2018, operating under a no-find, no-fee contract that would only see them paid if they located the wreckage. They scanned an additional 112,000 square kilometers of ocean floor using more advanced autonomous underwater vehicles than had been available during the first search. But despite the improved technology and expanded search area, Ocean Infinity's mission also ended without success, the ocean keeping its terrible secret. However, while the main wreckage remained missing, the ocean did eventually begin yielding some of its secrets. Since 2015, over 20 pieces of confirmed or suspected debris from MH370 have been recovered, washing up on coastlines across the Indian Ocean, on islands like Réunion, Madagascar, and Mauritius, and along the shores of Tanzania and South Africa. The first confirmed piece was a flaperon, a component from the aircraft's wing, found on Réunion Island in July 2015. Serial numbers on the component provided irrefutable proof. This piece of aviation equipment had once been part of the Boeing 777 registered as 9M MRO, the aircraft that had carried flight MH370. The theories and the evidence. As the physical search for MH370's wreckage continued to yield frustratingly few results, investigators, aviation experts, and independent researchers turned their attention to analyzing every available piece of data, trying to understand not just where the plane might be, but why it had disappeared in the first place. What emerged from this analysis wasn't a clear, definitive answer, but rather a collection of theories, some supported by hard evidence, others purely speculative, that painted vastly different pictures of what might have occurred on that March night in 2014. The most contentious and psychologically difficult theory to confront is what experts call pilot suicide or mass murder.
Without any shadow of doubt, this was controlled by a professional pilot who knew a 777, and he also knows the airspace around this area, and he used them to best effect.
The evidence supporting this theory is, admittedly, circumstantial but compelling. Investigators discovered that Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah had plotted similar routes on his home flight simulator, including flight paths that ended in the southern Indian Ocean, eerily similar to MH370's presumed final trajectory. Among 3,000 flights programmed into his simulator, only one went to the Indian Ocean, raising deeply troubling questions about whether this disappearance had been meticulously planned long before the aircraft ever left the ground.
And not only was it deliberate, it was pre-planned. I think every maneuver, every turn that was made in there was something that was pre-planned before the flight ever left the ground. I think that all of this pre-planned, the turn south is pre-planned, the destination is pre-planned, the whole thing is carried out according to a very deliberate plan.
One of the most haunting aspects of this theory involves the strange maneuver the aircraft made near Penang, Captain Zahari's hometown.
Why the strange move around Penang here?
The turn around Penang is a very odd turn, which I spent a long time thinking about it, technical reasons. Why has it got 3 turns instead of 1? Why hasn't it gone directly over Penang? Eventually, I equated it to a manoeuvre I was doing when I was flying over Australia. When I get to Ayers Rock, I used to ask the air traffic control for 3 miles right of track, due Ayers Rock. And so they'd approve it, and then I'd do a right turn.
The expert continues with a chilling interpretation.
I tell the passengers, if anybody wants to take a look, can do so. And then when we got a beam Ayers Rock, I turn back in a slow turn, just exactly like this. Turn back, let people have a look at Ayers Rock, take some pictures, and then I turn back the other way, back on the route. As we now know, the captain was from Penang.
So your conclusion is that he was having
Somebody was looking out the window.
A sentimental look at Penang?
Yeah, I think somebody was looking out the window during that turn. I can't see any other reason for it to be in that way, the 3 turns.
But perhaps the most horrifying aspect of the pilot suicide theory involves what likely happened to the passengers and crew.
What do we think has happened to the passengers at this point?
The thing that gets discussed the most, and probably most people would tend to start to agree with, is that at the point where the pilot turned the transponder off and made the turn to go in a different direction, that he depressurized the airplane, and which would disable the passengers. They would develop hypoxic conditions. Maybe they would succumb. At the very least, they would be incapacitated. And I think that if you go down into your deep thoughts, you think that's probably the most likely thing that the pilot would do, given his intention to make the airplane disappear and not wanting any interference from the back or anybody using cell phones or anybody trying to call people.
The theory suggests that by depressurizing the cabin at high altitude, anyone not on supplemental oxygen would have quickly lost consciousness due to hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, and likely died within minutes.
If I had loved ones on that airplane, I would want it to be true that at the very initiation of this wild ride that this airplane went on, that the pilot depressurized the airplane and eliminated the people from the back as an issue. There is no reason not to believe that that's what the pilot did, because that would be consistent with everything else that the pilot did. And I would be comforted in thinking that that's probably what happened.
However, it's crucial to note that not everyone accepts this theory as definitive.
I think all that we've got sufficient evidence to conclude at the moment is that this event was the result of deliberate action by someone very familiar with a 777 aircraft, a pilot very familiar with a 777 aircraft. We cannot take it at this stage further than that.
But when you
if we locate the aircraft and find flight recorders, cockpit voice recorder, unless there's been a major effort, which would be very difficult to destroy them, then you'll get some further evidence, and you'll get some evidence that might help establish what I do not think is yet established, which is questions of intent.
While theories about why the plane disappeared remain contentious, significant progress has been made in understanding where it might be. Independent aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey has developed an innovative approach using WSPR, Weak Signal Propagation Reporter technology, which analyzes disturbances in amateur radio signals potentially caused by aircraft. Godfrey's analysis of thousands of signal disturbances from March 8, 2014, led him to plot what he believes is MH370's exact flight path.
Since then, are you more confident or less confident that you are right?
I'm much more confident. I've been joined by 2 eminent scientists. We have also offered our research and our programs to academics around the world. We're down to an area, search area, which has a radius of 30 kilometers. So it's something that could be done in just a matter of a couple of weeks.
When asked about the credibility of his research, Godfrey is emphatic.
So how much more credible does it have to get?
I don't think it can get much more credible. From a scientific point of view, I don't think you could get more precise in knowing the flight route and knowing the crash location.
Another potentially crucial piece of evidence comes from an unexpected source, a fisherman named Kit Olver, who claims to have encountered what he believes was MH370's wing while trawling off the coast of South Australia in October 2014.
What did it look like?
Like a wing. It was a wing off a bloody aircraft.
When did you first think MH370?
Oh, pretty much as soon as we saw it. We thought it. Of course we did. And we got a pretty fair look at it.
Kit reported his discovery to authorities both shortly after the incident and again 3 years later, but his reports were largely dismissed.
They responded by saying that they thought that it could be a container, and I knew it was a container. It was a wing off an aircraft.
What do you say to people who might doubt what you saw that day?
Plenty of people just simply don't believe me. That's up to them. Amongst those criticisms, that I didn't pull my phone out to take a photo. I didn't knock off for a bloody picnic halfway through either. I was busy.
How many wings are sitting on the bottom of the ocean? Big ones, like the wing you found?
I wouldn't have thought many. And that was another part of my thinking. It's not from the MH370, what is it?
The search continues, and the human cost. 11 years after MH370's disappearance, the search for answers continues, driven by advancing technology, determined researchers, and the unwavering advocacy of families who refuse to let the world forget about their loved ones lost somewhere in the vast Indian Ocean.
It's a mission of mercy. Deep sea exploration company Ocean Infinity is carrying the hopes of the families of 239 passengers and crew as one of their ships once again sets off into the southern Indian Ocean. It's our greatest chance yet to find Malaysia Airlines flight MH370.
As of October 2025, Ocean Infinity has resumed operations under a $70 million no-find, no-fee contract signed with the Malaysian government on March 26, 2025. This represents the company's second attempt to locate the wreckage following their unsuccessful 2018 search. Operations officially commenced on February 25, 2025, utilizing the Armada 7806 vessel equipped with cutting-edge autonomous underwater vehicles.
After 20 years in the maritime business, the importance of finding the Boeing 777 is certainly not lost on Craig Wallace from Deep Sea Vision. The electrical engineer worked on the navigation technology being used in the renewed search.
They are the best placed in the world just now to do this search. You know, there's nobody got better resources or better people right now to conduct this search. And it's the best chance of success is with them.
The search has been conducted in phases, with Phase 1 running from February 23rd to 28 and Phase 2 from March 11th, 28, 2025. The target area encompasses 15,000 square kilometers in the southern Indian Ocean near the Broken Ridge, focusing on filling data gaps from previous searches and exploring previously unsearched zones.
The latest expedition, around 1,500 kilometres off the West Australian coast, relies on these underwater drones. They sink 6 kilometres down and scan the sea floor for up to 100 hours at a time. The drones are controlled remotely, and when seabed anomalies are found, the machine is redeployed to capture sonar images like these.
The first thing is trepidation, because you see a potential target and you'll see so many targets that you'll be let down over and over and over again. You get quite emotional. And it won't be until people get those camera images that we actually believe they found the wreckage.
During Phase 1, a potential debris field was detected, requiring further investigation. However, the mission was suspended in early April 2025 due to severe weather conditions, including waves exceeding 10 meters. Plans are in place to resume operations later in the year, potentially in November 2025.
And there will be a lot of times where they simply cannot launch or recover the vehicle.
There's absolutely no shelter out there, and there's nowhere to hide. You're 6 or 7 days away from the nearest port, which is Perth. These are dangerous conditions. If something goes wrong, it will turn catastrophic very, very quickly.
But behind every statistic and search grid are real people. Jackie Gonzalez's husband, Patrick Gomez, was the chief steward on flight MH370. 11 years later, she continues to wait for answers.
I thought we would have answers earlier, way earlier. 10 years? I don't know if I can wait another 10 years.
Just doesn't seem fair, does it?
A lot of people miss him, not only us, his friends miss him. But 10 years, of course, he's not coming back. So we have to accept it. But we still need to know exactly where he is and how it happened. We just have to wait.
The most frustrating thing is that we could now be closer than ever to knowing where the plane is. But no one is willing to go and find it. On top of Kid Olver's discovery, aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey believes he's pinpointed another location where parts of the wreckage could be. Do you feel like the Malaysian government is trying to cover up the truth about MH370?
They are certainly showing very little interest. We have shared our research with them. They say thank you very much, but we never get any response.
The Malaysian government has stated it will only restart the search if it receives new and credible evidence.
The aircraft or the pilot or the airline is in some way found to be at fault for the disappearance. Then the Malaysian government, as the ultimate owner of the airline and MH370, are exposed to compensation claims. In my view, they would prefer to bury the issue rather than solve it.
Angus Mitchell, Chief Commissioner of the ATSB, inherited this unsolved mystery when he took the position in 2021.
There's only two reasons that your search failed. Either you missed the aircraft or you were looking in the wrong spot. Which one do you think is more likely?
Well, I think it's probably a combination. Some of the resolution of that search area was with a high degree of accuracy, and we didn't find it there. So that would suggest that some of where we're looking wasn't the right spot. Now, where the right spot is, if we knew that, we would have searched there.
The critical question of whether someone was controlling the aircraft during its final descent fundamentally affects where searchers should be looking.
If there's someone at the controls all the way to the end, then the search area is very, very different than the one we actually looked at. And that scenario, I don't believe has ever adequately been considered, certainly wasn't by the Australian government. We'd drawn this box, this search box, and really at one point, I think we just became incapable of thinking outside of it.
Peter Waring believes the original search was fundamentally flawed.
The Australian government made a fundamental mistake in assuming that a transportation investigation authority could run a search, and not just any search, but the largest search in human history. I think that comes back to just the fundamental problem, which was that the ATSB, despite being full of well-intentioned people that I still consider friends, it was not the right organisation, it was not the right agency to be running the search.
Fuad Shiruji managed the crisis at Malaysia Airlines.
You must have felt like the weight of the world was on your shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I felt that everything's all on me.
He was in charge of managing the crisis at Malaysia Airlines.
If we could rewind the clock, there were certain things that we could have done differently, yes.
What is the number one thing you would do differently?
We could have improved on the intercommunication with the various government agencies rather than being disjointed. The police is doing something, the military is doing something else, the Ministry of Transport, it wasn't very effective.
Despite evidence many experts find compelling regarding pilot suicide, Fuad refuses to accept that Captain Zahari could have committed such an act.
He does not have the capacity or the character of an assassin.
But many have speculated that because he had plotted an almost identical flight path on his home simulator, it proves he had evil intentions.
There were 3,000 flights on his flight simulator. There was only one flight that went to Indian Ocean.
What other reason could Captain Zahari have been plotting that flight for?
I do not know. I mean, it's very common for pilots to practice ditching, landing on the sea, and to take away his own lives. it is not...
You can't fathom it?
I can't fathom it at all.
Jackie's anger at broken promises is justified.
I'm angry because they're not acknowledging what they're supposed to do. They promised, we'll find the plane, we'll do everything that we can, we won't give up.
Kit Olver finds the weight of his possible knowledge increasingly difficult to bear.
And it seems to be troubling me more now than it has in the past. And I saw a couple of programs on the relatives of the victims. And you've got to feel, can I contribute? Maybe.
For someone like yourself to solve such a mystery, what would it be like, do you think?
There would be tears. It's one of the biggest aviation mysteries, isn't it? If not the biggest. To bring closure to all those people, I think it's a great thing.
The Malaysian government's silence on the 10th anniversary was particularly painful.
No matter who you speak to about MH370, everyone wants the same thing: for someone to step up and resume the search for the missing plane. You'd think the 10-year anniversary would be a good time for the Malaysian government to do it. But there is little hope. No one from the Prime Minister down would speak to us, not even just to acknowledge the endless pain of the families left behind.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.